I used to believe that when something in your home felt slightly off, it was just your mind filling in gaps. That belief ended the week I realized my apartment was changing while I was gone. It started in early February in my small third-floor apartment in a quiet Milwaukee neighborhood. I had lived there for over a year without anything strange happening. The building was old but secure, a single entrance in the front with a code lock and a locked stairwell door at each floor. The first change was small enough to ignore. I came home from work one night and found my TV remote sitting on the kitchen counter. I always kept it on the coffee table. I figured I must have moved it without remembering. 2 days later, I noticed the framed photo of my sister and me had been moved to the opposite side of the shelf. I did not remember touching it. I told myself I was being paranoid. But then there were more changes. My bathroom door, which I always left open, was shut when I came home. The blanket on my bed was pulled tight, even though I never made it in the morning. My shoes by the door were placed in a perfect line. The pattern became too clear to ignore. I started paying attention to the smallest details before leaving for work. I would leave my keys slightly off-center on the counter, or angle a chair away from the table. When I returned, the keys would be perfectly centered. The chair pushed in flush. I talked to my landlord about it. He swore no one had entered my unit. He even checked the master keys, which had not been used. He said maybe I was sleepwalking. I had never done that in my life. To prove to myself I was not losing it, I bought a small motion-triggered camera and hid it on the bookshelf facing my living room. That first night, I caught nothing. The second night, the file was corrupted. I replaced the memory card, but the third night, it happened again. Each time, the recording cut off right before the point I suspected someone might have come in. The following Monday, I came home to find every cabinet door in the kitchen wide open. Every single one. My heart was pounding as I stood in the doorway. I checked every room, every closet, under the bed, nothing. That night, I barely slept. At some point, past midnight, I heard a faint sound from the living room, a slow, deliberate scrape, like something brushing against the wall. I did not move. I just listened. After maybe 30 seconds, it stopped. In the morning, I found something I had never noticed before. Near the floor, behind my couch, there was a small metal grate, maybe a foot across. I had always thought it was sealed, but now I could see dust disturbed around the edges and faint fingerprints on the metal. I unscrewed it. Behind was a narrow, pitch-black crawlspace. The air coming out was cold and stale. I called my friend Kevin to come over before I went any further. We took a flashlight and looked inside. It was barely wide enough for someone to move through, but the beam of light showed that it stretched both left and right, connecting to other parts of the building. Just a few feet inside, there was something that made my stomach turn a small pile of my things. A mug from my kitchen, a sock from my laundry, the photo frame of my sister, now empty, and a remote control. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, they searched the crawl space. It connected to a long-forgotten maintenance shaft that ran behind the walls. They said it was likely someone in the building, or someone who had gained access had been slipping in while I was gone, but they could not find anyone. No footprints, no fresh signs beyond my disturbed belongings. They told me it might have been a squatter who had moved on after realizing they'd been discovered. I moved out the next weekend. I told myself it was over. 3 months later, I was settled into a new place on the other side of the city. It was in a modern building with better locks and cameras in the hallways. I felt safe again. Then, last Sunday morning, I woke up and walked into my living room. My blanket, the one I always left in a messy heap on the couch, was folded neatly on the armrest. And on my kitchen counter was my old TV remote. I work as an overnight security guard for a small office complex in Columbus, Ohio. It is not an exciting job. The building is quiet. The cameras cover every hallway, and my shift is mostly just watching empty corridors until sunrise. One night in late September, I was working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Around 2 a.m., I did my usual walkthrough. All the offices were locked, the main doors secured. Everything was normal. I came back to the security desk, poured myself a coffee, and started scanning through the cameras again. I have a habit of reviewing earlier footage during the slower hours, mostly to keep myself awake. That night, I decided to check the recordings from around 12:30 a.m. just to see if anything had happened while I was in another part of the building. At first, it was uneventful. Empty hallways, locked doors. But then I saw movement on camera 4, which overlooks the long corridor on the second floor. It was me. I was walking slowly down the hallway, hands in my pockets. I looked calm, almost casual, but I knew for a fact that at 12:30 I was sitting at my desk on the first floor. I thought maybe the timestamps were off, so I pulled up the footage from camera 2, the one pointed right at the security desk. Sure enough, there I was, sitting at the desk at 12:30, sipping my coffee. So how could I be in two places at once? I scrubbed through the camera 4 footage again, watching myself walk the entire length of the hallway until I disappeared from view. The hallway lights flickered slightly as I passed under them. I never looked at the cameras, never broke pace. I checked the stairwell cameras, but there was nothing. No footage of me going up or coming down. It was as if I had appeared in the hallway out of nowhere. At that point, I felt a slow, tight knot forming in my stomach. I decided to go check the hallway in person. The second floor was dead silent. The air felt colder than usual, and for some reason, I kept glancing over my shoulder. The hallway was empty, just like it should have been. Back at the desk, I rewound the footage again, only this time, I watched myself from the beginning of the shift. Around 12:20, my double came out of the stairwell on the far side of the building. A stairwell I never use because it is always locked from the inside. I watched as this version of me moved down the hall, then out of frame. I checked every camera that could have caught where he went. Nothing. It was like he vanished. By now, my coffee had gone cold. I was sweating, but I also felt strangely numb. I thought maybe someone was messing with me, maybe another guard wearing a mask or something. But the way he moved, the way his shoulders hunched exactly like mine when I am tired, it was me. At 3:15, while I was still staring at the footage, I noticed something on the live feed from camera 7. Movement. In the reflection of a glass office door at the far end of the hallway, I saw the shape of someone standing still. They were facing the camera, too far away to make out their face clearly. I switched to camera 6, which was aimed straight down that hallway. It was empty. No one there. When I switched back to camera 7, the reflection was gone. I told myself I was overtired, that I needed to stop staring at the screens. I decided to make one more physical round of the building. I started with the far stairwell, the one my double had supposedly come from. The door was locked, just like always. I rattled the handle to be sure. When I turned to leave, I noticed something on the floor. A single black coffee stirrer, like the ones we keep at the security desk. I'd been using one earlier that night. I never brought it upstairs. The rest of my shift, I kept the cameras up but avoided looking at the earlier footage again. I counted the hours until daylight. When my replacement came in at 7, I stayed behind for a few minutes to check one last thing. I pulled the recording from my own body-worn security badge cam. We are required to wear them during shifts, though they only record when manually turned on. The footage from that night showed me doing my rounds, except there was a 2-minute gap starting at exactly 12:30. When the video resumed, I was standing in the second-floor hallway, staring directly into the lens. My eyes were wide, my mouth slightly open. Then the feed cut out again. I have no memory of that moment. None. I did not tell my supervisor. I just said the cameras glitched. But I cannot stop thinking about the way I looked in that body cam footage. Almost like I was watching myself from somewhere else. Last year, I drove for a courier service in my city. I used my own car, and my phone was my GPS. Most days were predictable: pick up a package, drop it off, repeat. But in April, something started happening that I still cannot explain. It began on a Thursday morning. I picked up an envelope from the distribution center, typed the delivery address into my GPS, and started driving. The route seemed normal until the voice navigation told me to turn down a narrow side street I had never noticed before. It was a dead end, with a single boarded-up brick building at the end. The windows were covered, the doors chained shut. I figured the GPS had glitched, so I checked the address again. It was right, but there was no mailbox, no company sign, nothing. I marked the package as undeliverable and moved on. The next day, it happened again. Different package, different address, but halfway through the route, the GPS instructed me to turn down the exact same side street, toward the same abandoned building. I switched to a different navigation app. It still led me there. By the third day, I was starting to get uneasy. I knew it could not be coincidence. I even typed in my own home address, just to see what would happen. The GPS mapped the route perfectly at first. Then, 5 minutes from home, it rerouted me toward that same boarded-up building. On Saturday, I decided to check it out during my break. I parked across the street and looked it over from my car. The place was clearly empty weeds, growing up through cracks in the sidewalk, graffiti covering the lower bricks. But something felt wrong. There was a metal security door at the side, the kind with no handle on the outside. And high up, behind one of the boarded windows, I saw a faint light flicker just for a second. I left. Sunday morning, before my shift, I factory reset my phone. I deleted every navigation app and reinstalled them. But the first delivery of the day still tried to take me there. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was just a set of coordinates. Out of curiosity, I tapped them. They led directly to the same building. I told my supervisor I thought someone was hacking my GPS, maybe targeting my phone. He brushed it off, said it was probably a bug in the map data. The next week, the problem got worse. It did not matter what address I put in the GPS, always led me to that street eventually. Sometimes it would start me on the right path, then at the last second, reroute me. On Wednesday night, I decided to see if I could force it to stop. I parked my car at the far end of the city and typed in an address for the opposite side. The route looked fine. But 20 minutes in, the voice said, "Turn right," and I realized where I was, only a block from that same building. This time, I did not stop at the corner. I drove right up to it and parked. The street was empty. The air felt colder than the surrounding neighborhood, like stepping into shade on a hot day. I got out of the car. The boards over the windows were warped and splintered. A faint buzzing came from inside, maybe a fluorescent light, maybe something else. As I circled the building, I found a small alleyway and back. At the end was another metal door, slightly ajar. I should have left. Instead, I pushed it open. The air inside was damp and smelled like rust. I could barely see, but enough light came from somewhere deeper in. The floor was littered with old paper, broken wood, and empty bottles. I followed the light until I reached a hallway. On the left, one of the boarded windows had a narrow gap, letting in a sliver of daylight. On the right, a single door stood open. Inside was a small room. Against the far wall sat a folding table with an old laptop. The screen was on, showing a live GPS map. My location was a blinking blue dot, right where I stood. Then the map zoomed in, and another dot appeared, red, moving toward mine from inside the building. I spun around. The hallway was empty, but I heard something faint, slow, heavy footsteps on the concrete floor. I ran. I did not stop until I was back in my car, slamming the door and peeling away. When I checked my phone, the GPS was no longer working at all. No signal, no satellites found. The next day, I got a call from a restricted number. A man's voice said, "You found it. We will find you." Then the line went dead. I quit the courier job the same week. I changed my phone, my number, everything. But every so often, my new GPS glitches for just a second, and I see that same street name appear on the screen.